Good evening. Hope whoever is watching this has had a really great day. I'm starting to get some cool stuff going, so I'm happy, and I hope that this reading can pass it on to you. Alright. The Bluebird and His Brother. It was said of two bluebirds that they were unlike as two brothers could be. That one was a pearl in a pod and the other a pea. Pearl was happy-go-lucky, and pea was gloomy-go-sorry. I am in love with love and life, sang the glad bird. I am afraid of sex and flight, said the sad bird. Pearl flaunted his gay feathers like a bonny blue flag, and his song was as bold as the rebel yell. He went south every winter alone, and came up north every spring with a different female. His gay philosophy freed his psyche of the strains of fear and the stresses of guilt, and he attained a serenity of spirit that few male birds had and even fewer male human beings ever reach. He did not worry, because some of his children were also his nieces, the daughters of one of his sisters. He sat loose, sang pretty, and slept tight in 100 honey locusts and cherry trees and lilac bushes. And every winter he went south alone, and every spring he came north with a different female. He did not worry, because some of his grandchildren were also like his grandnephews, the grandsons of one of his sisters. At sunset in summertime, the gay bluebird flew higher than the lark or the wild goose, and he was pleased to note that, like himself, heaven wore blue with a tinge of red. The gloomy bluebird went south alone in the winter, and came north alone in the spring, and never flew higher than you could throw a sofa. While still in his prime, he developed agoraphobia, and went to live underground, to the surprise and dismay of families of frogs and foxes and moles and gophers and crickets and toads, and of bewildered dog, dug himself up one day while burying a bone, then hastily buried him again, without ceremony or sorrow. Moral: it is more dangerous to straight-arm life than to embrace it. I like that one. The Clothes Moth and the Luna Moth. A clothes moth, who lived in a closet and had never done anything or wanted to do anything except to eat wool and fur, flew out of his closet one twilight just in time to see a lovely Luna Moth appear on the outside of a window. The Luna Moth fluttered against the light glass as gracefully as a drifting autumn leaf, and she was dressed in a charming evening gown. What interested her was the flame of a candle burning in the room, burning on the mantelpiece above the fireplace. But the clothes moth thought she was making signs at him, and he conceived a great desire for her. I have to have you, said the clothes moth. But the Luna Moth laughed, and her laughter was like the bells of Elfland faintly tinkling. Go eat a shroud, said the Luna Moth haughtily. You are as vulgar as a tent moth or a gypsy moth, and nowhere near as handsome as a tiger moth. If you come to live with me, I will feed you on sweaters and stoles, said the clothes moth, whose ardor was only increased by the lovely Luna's scorn. You are a flug, who can flugger, but not fly or flutter. said the Luna moth, trying to get through the window pane and reach the star on the mantelpiece. You can have wedding dresses and evening clothes and a mink coat, panted the cloth's moth, and again the Luna moth's laughter was like the bells of Elfland faintly tinkling. I live on twilight and the stars, she said. It was love at first flight, the clothes moth protested. It was love at first flutter. The Luna moth's tiny silvery tone became sharper. You are a mulch, she said. A mulbus, a crog, and a common crebe. All of these words were words a nice moth rarely uses, but that had no effect upon the passion of the clothes moth. I know you have one wing in the grave, he told her. I know you're not long for the world, so I must have you as soon as I can. A thing of beauty is a joy for such a little time. The lovely Luna moth tried to cajole her admirer into opening the window so that she could fly into the fascinating flame above the fireplace. But she did not tell him this. She let him believe that his drab gray lovemaking had won her heart. In his desire to reach her, he flew against the window pane, time and again, finally made a small opening in it, and then fluttered crazily to the floor, dead of a broken head and wings and body. The lovely Luna, whose desire for the star is a matter of immortal record, flew swiftly and gracefully toward the candle on the mantelpiece, and when it was consumed in its flame with a little zishing sound, like that made of a lighted cigarette dropped in a cup of coffee. Moral: love is blind, but desire just doesn't give a good goddamn. I like that one too. The lover and his lass. An arrogant gray parrot and his arrogant mate listened one African afternoon in disdain and derision to the lovemaking of a lover and his lass, who happened to be hippopotamuses. He calls her Snooky Yookums, said Mrs. Gray. Can you believe that? No, said Gray. I don't see how any male in his right mind could entertain affection for a female that has no more charm than a capsized bathtub. Capsized bathtub indeed, exclaimed Mrs. Gray. Both of them have the appeal of a coastwise fruit steamer, with a cargo of waterlogged basketballs. But it was spring, and the lover and his lass were young. They were oblivious to the scornful comments of their sharp-tongued neighbors, and they continued to bump each other around in the water, happily pushing and pulling, backing and filling, snorting and snaffling. The tender things they said to each other during the monolithic give and take of their courtship sounded as lyric to them as flowers in bud, or green things opening. To the Greys, however, the bumbling romp of the lover and his lass was hard to comprehend, and even harder to tolerate. And for a time, they thought of calling the ABI, or African Bureau of Investigation, on the ground that monolithic lovemaking by enormous creatures, who should have become indecent fossils long ago, was probably a threat to the security of the jungle. But they decided instead to phone their friends and neighbors and gossip about the shameless pair, and describe them in mocking and monstrous metaphors involving skidding buses on icy streets and overturned moving vans. Late that evening, The hippopotamus and the hippopotama were surprised and shocked to hear the greys exchanging terms of endearment. "Listen to those squawks," waffled the male hippopotamus. "What in the world can they see in each other?" gurgled the female hippopotamus. "I would as soon live with a pair of unoiled garden shears and her inamoratus." They called up their friends and neighbors and discussed the incredible fact that a male gray parrot and a female gray parrot could possibly have any sex appeal. It was long after midnight before the hippopotamuses stopped criticizing the grays and fell asleep, and the grays stopped maligniting the hippopotamuses and retired to their beds. Moral: laugh, and the world laughs with you. Love, and you love alone. That will do it for tonight. I hope you sleep well.